the palm of my hand is a really cool device from GL.iNet that can keep you safe on the web, as well as allow you to connect back to your home base from anywhere in the world. How, you ask? Using one of the most well-known acronyms in tech these days, VPN, or Virtual Private Network. All your favorite YouTubers are sponsored by them, and all of your IT friends are talking about how they run their own, and there's a reason you hear so much about them, because they're so freaking useful. Now, before I talk about this little dude, let me briefly talk about the basics of a VPN. When you hear someone talk about using a VPN, they're talking about one of two ways, as a VPN server or a VPN client. Running a VPN client allows you to connect to a VPN server that's located elsewhere, and this is what's used when you run a famous VPN app like PIA, NordVPN, Surfshark, or whatever flavor of the month is being shilled on YouTube. Basically, it routes all your traffic through a completely different server, which can keep your activity safe and anonymous. It can also unlock geo-restricted content if you're trying to get your anime fix. The other option is running your own VPN server. This is what people are doing when you hear them talk about how they can VPN back into their network and connect all their stuff. Both cases are extremely useful, and we'll take a look at how this device can be used to easily set up both, as well as some other tricks. So this is the Brume2 from GL.iNet, and it's a $60 security gateway that will allow you to easily set up a VPN client, VPN server, DNS, ad blocking, and all kinds of cool shit. This is the plastic one, but they do have a fancy metal one that's more expensive, so if you care about that, then yeah, it exists. I've reviewed quite a few GL.iNet products on this channel, and they're always rock solid. This one's no different. As you can see, it is tiny AF, and on the back, we have our USB-C power input, USB-A for data tethering, 2.5 gig WAN, and 1 gigabit LAN. Not gonna blow you away with the I/O, but hey, you get 2.5 gig WAN, and remember, this is a $60 device. So the way this thing is intended to work is to sit between your ISP modem and your switch or access points. So I'm gonna show you my recommended setup. So you'd have your GL.iNet Brume sitting here, and then at the head, you would have your ISP modem, which connects you to the internet, and you would connect your ISP modem directly to the Brume within the 2.5 gig WAN port. Let's turn around so you can see. Then behind that, you would have your switch, and I am using a tiny little 5-port one. Doesn't matter if it's small like this or if it's a huge Chungus boy 48-port one. Doesn't matter. You would connect the Brume from the LAN port directly into your switch, and then from there you could connect anything into your switch from computers, access points, whatever. Now you're probably thinking, well, I wish this had more ports on here, but yeah, then it would be more expensive and bigger. So like I mentioned, it's $60. You get what you pay for. You have to sacrifice some things when you're at this price point. But with all that said, let's dive into the UI of this device before we get into any of those fancy VPN features. So here we are in the UI. If you've seen some of my other GL.iNet videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of their GUI. On their dashboard, you can see some useful things like what type of WAN you are using. See, we are using Ethernet, obviously, because we have an ISP modem, but I've used both tethering and cellular. Over here, you can see some of the features that are enabled. We have AdGuard and VPN, more on that later. And then your number of LAN clients. I only have one because my Brume is attached directly to this PC, and that's it. I'm not using a switch because I'm only using one device. All right, as we walk through the UI, just know that I've covered this a lot more extensively in my other videos. I will link them down below if you want some more information on those, but I want to go briefly over some of the things in here just so that we can get into the good stuff, the VPN. Clients obviously gives you a list of all your clients. Like I said, I only have one, nothing too exciting here. VPN, we'll come back to that later. Applications. I briefly talked about plugins in one of my other videos. I'm not a huge fan of this. It's just so much stuff here. If you dig through it, you might be able to find something useful, but yeah, don't worry about this. DNS, if you want to access your router remotely, we won't need this since we will have a VPN. Good Cloud, I don't really talk much about this. It's more of a business feature, or if you have a bunch of different locations and routers that you want to manage. It's all done in the cloud remotely. It's pretty cool, but not really useful for the average person. Network storage, the USB port on this device can actually be used to house mass storage if you want to do that. I would just use a NAS, but in a pinch, it could work. AdGuard, another useful service that comes native on this device. It is off by default, but I've turned it on. What it does is gives you more flexibility with your ad blocking and your DNS. You are free to go directly into the settings page and modify a bunch of the settings in here if you want to get really fancy with your DNS blocking and filtering, but default, it'll provide some basic blocking, some basic DNS filtering. But yeah, again, outside the scope of this video, really cool feature. Check out AdGuard if you are interested. Under network, this is going to be all your settings for your network, obviously. Firewall, so port forwarding. If you want to throw it in the DMZ, that's all here. Multiple WAN, so yes, you can run a multi-WAN setup here with failover and load balancing, because although we only have one WAN port, both the tethering and the WAN port can be used as WANs, which is multiple WANs, which is pretty cool. I've demonstrated this on another video. I'm going to stop saying that. Just check those out. LAN, pretty basic stuff. Specify your subnet, starting IP, ending IP. By default, they give you about 100 static IP addresses. Neat. DNS, if you have AdGuard turned on, you don't really get much of a choice here. The rest of the stuff is pretty uninteresting, except for drop-in gateway. So this is pretty cool. So I said before that you would use the Brume as your main router, but if you already have a very powerful existing router, but you still want the features of the Brume with AdGuard or VPN Client, you can drop this in behind your router and still get access to those features if you enable drop-in gateway mode. And clicking on this will give you a kind of walkthrough on how to do it depending on which router you're already running, but it's pretty straightforward. The LAN port from your router would go directly into the WAN port of your Brume. You would then enable drop-in gateway, specify the IP address and the gateway of your existing router. And then on your main router, for example, TP-Link, you would go into the GUI, find where it says DHCP server, disable that, and now your Brume is your DHCP server. You still get all the connections with your main router, but now your Brume can do all the fancy things that you wanted it to. And then system, a bunch of settings, blah, 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 pretty boring. Nothing too crazy to see here. Now, when I was made aware of this device, you know what the first use case I thought of was? Using this as a VPN server that I can easily deploy at my parents' house. Now, why would I want to do that? Believe it or not, it's a common thing to use a family member's house to store an offsite backup server. Now, instead of having to run all of the VPN stuff on the server itself, we can configure this device to run a VPN server, then simply plug it all in at your remote site. This will make it extremely easy to connect your server and transfer files. Also, with this setup, you will be able to connect to anything on the network. So if you have multiple servers, it's no problem. Let's look at how we would set it up. Luckily, they made it pretty freaking easy. Going into our VPN dashboard will give us a summary of everything that's going on from our VPN clients to our VPN server. Now, I've already gone ahead and set up my WireGuard VPN server. You do have the option to use either OpenVPN or WireGuard for both your client and your server. WireGuard is going to be faster for the most part, but I feel like there's more compatibility with OpenVPN amongst different applications, but whatever one works for you, go for it. The setup is essentially the same. So what you want to do is decide on if you're using OpenVPN or WireGuard. We've used WireGuard for our server, so let's check out what I've done. And I did say it's easy, and I wasn't lying. You can basically just keep the default settings and start it if you want. The only thing I changed was this IPv4 address because it was default using the 10.0.0.1 subnet, which is something that I use on my local network, and I didn't want those to kind of have issues. I guess this is what they would do. I don't know what this is. So I changed that, started it, and to get a client connected, you actually have to go over into profiles and then add a profile for each device you want to connect. So you can see I have two here that I've tested with, my main PC and my MacBook. It's actually really easy. All you do is just give it a name, and then you can set custom parameters here, but honestly, just leave it default and it'll work, I promise. So once you have these created, you can actually go in here and it will give you a QR code or a configuration file. I like to use the configuration file. So go over here, click download, and it will download you can see I've downloaded a bunch of them, a configuration file. And you will save that and use that on your client device. So I've been using my MacBook, so let's take a look at that. So here we are in Mac OS. It's going to be essentially the same no matter what operating system you're on. You're going to want to download the WireGuard client app. And in Mac OS, you can do that through the App Store. I've already done this, so let's open it up and take a look at what we are seeing. So we'll go ahead and delete this one and then reconfigure it just so I can show you how easy it is. So obviously when you first download it, you're not going to have anything in here, and it will give you the option of importing tunnel from file. Now remember that configuration file that was generated from our Brume? Yeah, well, just click on that and import it. Allow. Everything is imported and all you have to do is click activate. And just like that, we are connected back to our Brume network through a WireGuard VPN. And if you're thinking, well, Brett, you're on the same network, you're in the same house, this doesn't count. So I actually do have two WANs coming into my house. So the Brume is on my Spectrum internet, and this is actually on my main AT&T internet. So by all intents and purposes, they are completely separate networks and may as well be, hundreds or thousands of miles away from each other. And a cool feature is now, since I am running a WireGuard VPN, I can remote desktop back into this machine from a completely separate network all over WireGuard. So here we are, back in our Windows machine. I know it's less cool when I'm like 2 feet away, but I didn't really want to drive hundreds of miles to show this off when I could just do it from the comfort of my own chair. But yeah, just to show you and just to prove that it works, let's deactivate it. Now we are back on our AT&T network, and now let's try to connect back into that same Windows machine. Oh, it doesn't work because we're on separate networks. So yeah, pretty cool feature, really easy to set up, makes it easy to connect to any device that's on your local network back home. All right, so now that the VPN server is up and running, we can connect to it from anywhere using a VPN client like I just showed. And that can be a simple VPN client app like I used, or we can get fancy and use another GL.iNet product for a little site-to-site VPN action. Using my Barrel router, I can set up the VPN client directly on here, and boom, just like that, all my devices are connected and can be routed through the VPN client back to the Brume2 VPN server network. This can be pretty useful for larger setups. Speed-wise, it'll always be limited by the slowest point in the chain, whether that's the ISP connection, port speed, server NIC speed, storage configuration, and even VPN type. Like I said, for the most part, WireGuard is going to be faster than OpenVPN, so keep that in mind. Really cool stuff here, but that's not the only VPN trick it's got. Just like you can run a VPN server on this device, you can also run a VPN client. This will allow us to connect back to another remote site and do some VPN cascading to give us extreme flexibility with our remote connections. You can also use it to connect to one of your VPN services so that all the devices that connect through here will be directed through that VPN. I personally have a PIA account, so let's set that up. All right, back in the GUI, we are going to go into OpenVPN Client. Now, why would I use WireGuard for a server and OpenVPN for a client? Well, that's because PIA uses OpenVPN. So right away, you'll see that you can use NordVPN. I believe at the time of making this, that's the only one that's kind of got its own little API integration within the web UI, but that's no problem. We can add ours manually. So go ahead and click that, add a new provider. We will call it PIA. And then it's going to ask us to select a file or drag it here. Now, where do we get that from? Well, if you're using PIA, simply log into your account and go over to the download section. Scroll past all of the client apps, mobile apps, extensions, blah, 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 down to the VPN settings. Now, you can pick a default one or you can use their generator. We'll do that. There's honestly not too many things to pick, don't worry. And I guess I have to log back in. So you pick your OpenVPN version. We are using 2. I can't remember. It's definitely a newer version. Platform shouldn't really matter, but this is running on Linux, so just select Linux. Now here's where you're going to select which VPN server you want to connect through. And depending on what your use case is, you might want to connect through Asia, Africa, whatever. We will keep it local in North America. And yeah, sure, let's do California. Then we'll go down here, select the port. This is fine, just leave this default and click generate. It's going to give us a OpenVPN configuration file. Then guess what we do with it? Go back into our panel, select a file. We will select the one I just created. Then you have to enter your username and password for your account. Once we're logged in, you should see a success message, and yeah, honestly, that easy. So I go back into our dashboard. You can see there's a client listed here, and once we enable that, it'll start up and boom, we are connected. So here is our new IP address that we've been given. So even if I go to what's my IP, bada bing, bada boom, we have some random IP through PIA's network located in California, which is not where I'm at, in case you didn't know that. So one thing I forgot to touch on, when you are setting up your VPN server, you're going to want to make sure you go into the options for whichever type you've selected and make sure that this allow remote access LAN is on if you want to be able to access clients that are back in your home network over your VPN. So if you were looking to connect back into your home network and access your NAS or something, make sure this is checked. Now this doesn't have to be used to connect through PIA. Like I said before, you can use this client to connect to another remote server that's hosted on another GL.iNet device and do some VPN cascading. And if you want to do that, go into global options, not in the client global options, in the server global options, enable VPN cascading. So what this will do is take connections coming in from the server and pass them through to the client. So not only will clients connecting back in through your VPN server have access to everything on the LAN, but they'll also have access to everything through the VPN client connection. So like it sounds, cascading, you have one VPN coming in and then using that same connection to propagate through to the same VPN client connection. I'll probably have a diagram over my face to further explain this because I am doing a terrible job. So these are some pretty basic examples of how you can use this device. Obviously, everyone's network isn't the same, so you may have different use cases and an entirely different setup, and that's okay. But overall, what do I think about this thing? It's pretty awesome for what it is, a low-cost security gateway that makes it easy to connect to and from remote sites. Is it going to replace your entire server rack full of networking gear? No. I mean, come on, it's $60. Throw it on a test network, set it up at a friend's house, travel with it, play catch with it, it's up to you. Links to both models as well as some other GL.iNet products that I use are down in the description if you want to check them out. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are my VPN server that I can always connect with no matter where I am. Heart emoji. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.